The Arkansas air was thick with humidity that late spring afternoon in 1993. What started as a missing persons case quickly spiraled into something far more sinister, something that would haunt me for years to come. 3 young boys had been reported missing. Their names? Stevie Branch, Michael Moore, and Christopher Byers, all 8 years old. They were last seen riding their bikes near a wooded area known locally as Robin Hood Hills, a quiet spot on the outskirts of West Memphis where kids often went to play. I remember the mother's voice on the phone, trembling, desperate, clinging to hope. I gathered my team and we began our search. For hours, we combed through the woods, calling their names, hoping they had simply wandered too far. But as the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the trees, that hope began to fade. The next morning, we found them. It was a discovery that chilled me to the core. The boys' bodies were found in a drainage ditch, no clothes, bound with their own shoelaces, their small frames battered and bruised. The crime scene was gruesome, evidence of violence that seemed almost ritualistic in nature. Stevie, Michael, and Christopher had been taken from this world in an act of senseless brutality. It wasn't just a murder, it was a slaughter. The town was in shock, and fear quickly took root. As the lead detective on the case, I knew this would be no ordinary investigation. The pressure was immediate: find the killer and find him fast. We began gathering evidence, but from the start, something about the case felt off. The scene had been contaminated by the water, and crucial pieces of forensic evidence seemed frustratingly absent. In a town like West Memphis, whispers of the devil, witchcraft, and satanic rituals spread like wildfire. It didn't take long for those whispers to turn into accusations. A local teenager named Damian Echols quickly became the prime suspect. He was different, quiet, brooding, with a penchant for heavy metal and a fascination with the occult. In the eyes of the town, he was guilty before I could even collect the first piece of real evidence. 2 of his friends, Jason Baldwin and Jesse Miskelly, were dragged into the investigation as well. They were young, just kids themselves, misfits, outcasts. It didn't matter. The town wanted justice, and these 3 teenagers became the targets. I remember interrogating Jesse Miskelly. He was scared, barely 17, with an IQ that hovered below average. Under the intense pressure of questioning, he eventually gave us what we were looking for, a confession, but something about it felt wrong. The details didn't match the crime scene, and his timeline was all over the place. Yet, once the confession was on tape, it was hard to argue against it. The prosecution built a case based on fear and prejudice rather than facts. They painted Damien as the ringleader, a satanic figure who had orchestrated the ritualistic murders of the 3 boys. Jason and Jesse were his followers, blindly dragged into the horrors of the night. Despite the lack of physical evidence, the jury was convinced. All 3 teenagers were convicted. Damien was sentenced to death. Jason and Jesse were given life sentences. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The investigation had been rushed, corners had been cut, and those boys, Echols, Baldwin, Miskelly, didn't seem capable of the level of violence we'd seen at the crime scene. My doubts grew, and as the years passed, I continued to dig. What I uncovered made my blood run cold. New DNA evidence came to light, and none of it matched the 3 convicted teenagers. It was as if the real killer had slipped through our fingers, leaving behind only the innocent to take the fall. Worse yet, evidence began to emerge suggesting that police had coerced Jesse's confession. He had been confused, scared, and fed information. This wasn't justice. It was a travesty. In 2007, DNA testing on the crime scene materials confirmed what I had suspected all along. The DNA found on the ligatures used to bind the boys didn't match Damien, Jason, or Jesse. Instead, it matched Terry Hobbs, the stepfather of Stevie Branch. While this new evidence didn't conclusively prove Terry Hobbs was the killer, it was enough to call into question the entire original investigation. The case began to unravel, and in 2011, after nearly 2 decades behind bars, the West Memphis 3 were released through an offered plea. It was a bittersweet victory. The teenagers I had once helped convict had lost their youth in prison, and the true killer had never been brought to justice. The town had been so quick to condemn, to label those boys as monsters, that we missed the real predator lurking in the shadows. To this day, I still feel the weight of the mistakes we made, the rush to judgment, the pressure to find someone to blame, anyone, so long as the community could feel safe again. But there was no safety in the truth that followed. The boys who were convicted weren't killers, and the boys we found in the woods, Stevie Branch, Michael Moore, and Christopher Byers, never received the justice they deserved. The case of the West Memphis Three remains a haunting reminder that sometimes, in our pursuit of justice, we can create more victims than we set out to protect.